is in a wide variety of things, from political campaigns, working at universities, tech startups, public affairs firms, teaching at universities, and for about the last 6 years, supporting public sector and national security organizations through the lens of the brand marketing and kind of PR work that I do. And so it's sort of that very diverse background that I speak to you today. And the organization I represent currently, the National Security Innovation Network, a Department of Defense organization, really seeks to bring non-traditional problem solvers to the table to solve problems for the Department of Defense. So that might mean a military unit or a soldier. And what we're trying to do is bring folks that typically aren't engaged to solve these problems, like academia or early stage startups and entrepreneurs, to take a problem that we source from a military unit and then send it out to folks who aren't used to working together or ever for the DoD, and say, hey, could you solve this problem? And more than likely, we're looking for a solution that is not just a military solution, but a dual use, so a commercial solution, because we literally help launch companies who can solve those kind of problems. So when I came into this job 2 years ago, organization was only 3 years old, didn't have much of a footprint. And I needed to find a way to really surface the stories of this great work we are doing so that we could continue to get funding from Congress, support within the DoD, and source more problems. That's our lifeblood. Like literally my colleagues who work on the equivalent of our sales team, their quota is how many problems can you source? And so I sit at the epicenter of that to communicate the impact of the problems that we're able to solve for the Department of Defense. And, I would just kick it off by saying it'd be really easy to go out and tell the story as the marketer of, NSIN, National Security Innovation Network, we did this, we did that, and position ourselves as the hero. That's really the shortcut, easy way out, but that's the path to failure. So by way of introduction, I wanted to kind of set that stage and dissect really the two parts of our topic today, innovation and storytelling. So you start with innovation, right? It's a really overused word. You can just imagine the cartoons where someone says, just use innovation in your sentence and you'll sound really smart, like you're doing something new. It's just one of those many buzzwords that we're all really familiar with. And the reality is every organization or business goes through a process of building out or stages of development that internally might feel, quote, innovative because you're doing it at that place for the first time together, but doesn't really probably pass the smell test as like truly innovative. And so to begin our discussion about storytelling or innovation storytelling, we have to really kind of break down these two definitions. So, there's many different definitions of innovation. One that I like is innovation is the implementation of new ideas that add value. So there's really three key parts to that. So implementation, meaning like you actually did it. New ideas, so new, something that's not been done. And really, I think the clincher is something that adds value. So implementation, new ideas, and add value. I think that's the easiest way to think about innovation. And that new factor is critical, but I think actually the adding value is more important than anything. So here's a way to kind of think about it easily. So, lots of different toothpaste brands out there, right? Most just look like the others on the shelf. But to truly innovate and differentiate your toothpaste, you have to find a gap in the market that otherwise hasn't been filled. So is it about something with your gums or something else that doesn't exist in the marketplace right now? Then you could say that your toothpaste might be innovative because it solves a problem that hasn't been solved before, right? And so that adds value. That's that key part. So innovation. So part two, storytelling. Again, another hugely overused word right now that many people are using to describe everything under the sun that might be considered communications. I think that's a mistake because that's not really what storytelling is. So here's the definition I like about storytelling. So a story is a narrative account of an event or a sequence of events that can be true or fictional. So when you think about storytelling, sometimes the first concept that comes to mind is something fictional, but actually the origins of storytelling are about conveying knowledge, culture, and information. So it's really more a word that has origins in the fact-based communications rather than sort of fictional stories. Couple of bullet points to think about storytelling that really feed off of this idea around fact-based or communicating knowledge is the purpose of storytelling. So the first is that stories bring brains together. Stories cut through the noise, we learn through stories, and we connect with strangers through stories. That's how two brains really connect. It can be around a story because that might be the only thing that we have in common. And the good news is that stories are really like a formula. So we can actually create a map for how customers or other people we're trying to influence, how to help them follow us and engage with our products and services to better relate through a formula of a story. And I'm going to share a quick little framework with you to kind of kick off our discussion and show you, share two examples. So to tie the innovation definition and the storytelling definition together around a framework for innovation storytelling, think about classic story framework, right? Whether it's Star Wars, right? You guys all know the Star Wars story, right? So you have, a character, you have Luke, right? And he's facing a problem, right? He has an external problem. He has to defeat the universe. His internal problem or question is he really a Jedi? And his philosophical question is really sort of that good versus evil. So we have our character Luke, who has different types of problems that he's facing, both internal, external, and philosophical. And he meets a guide, right? So Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? And the guide is living as a Jedi. And the guide gives Luke a plan. And the plan is to trust the Force. And he calls Luke to action, go defeat the Empire. And then at that point in the story, there's kind of two branches that can happen. Luke can be successful and avoid failure, defeat the rebellion, and be successful and avoid failure, right? And then the final outcome is the rebellion is crushed. So you think about this framework where you have a character who has a problem, meets a guide, who gives them a plan, calls them to action that ends in success and helps the character avoid failure. This is the classic hero's journey. You may have seen this, maybe slightly different names, but that's really the hero's journey. And I think that's a really important framework to apply through the lens of innovation storytelling, because the number one problem or mistake companies or organizations make in telling their innovation stories is they position themselves as the hero. They position themselves as Luke. Because you think about it, we did this, we solved this problem, we changed the way, you're so proud of this big problem you solved. It's really enticing to put yourself at the center and to focus yourself as the hero. That's the easy way out. And it's actually not the way to really engage your audience and be effective innovation storytellers. So by understanding this hero's journey and the hero's framework, if you think about your innovation that you're solving and that you position yourself as the guide, and your solution, the thing you invented or innovated, is really the plan part, and you're able to show how you're calling to action your customer or the person who the innovation solves a problem for, then you're going to be more successful telling that story. So think about it through the lens of, so that's Star Wars, but think about it if you're Tesla, right? So the villain in the Tesla innovation story is gas guzzling cars and inferior technology. And the external problem that a customer has is, I need a car. The internal problem they have is, I want to be an early adopter of new technology. Like, that's important to me. but they also have philosophical kind of pings. You know, my car that I choose ought to, you know, help save the environment, and be green. So you think about, you know, how your customer, by understanding your customers' philosophical problems, you can actually craft your story better of how Tesla has innovated, and do it through the lens of the people that you're actually trying to help. Think about, so Nespresso, right? Coffee machine, little pods. So the villain is coffee machines that make bad coffee, right? Coffee machines that suck. The external problem is a customer has is, you know, I want better tasting coffee at home. I don't want to have to go to a Starbucks. My internal problem is I want my home coffee machine to make me feel sophisticated. You know, as sophisticated as I feel when I walk into Starbucks, someone waits on me, a whole line of people actually wait on me and handcraft my beverage and then serve it to me by calling my name. Like, if you hadn't thought about it before, doesn't that make you feel kind of special? Like you really unpack it? Why do you think they charge $6 for what I make at home in my cup? I mean, it is a feeling that they're selling when you go into a Starbucks. They put a lot of thought into all of that because they're actually trying to help solve a customer's internal problem, which they want to feel sophisticated. So Nespresso recognizes that, right? They want to solve that internal issue of feeling that your homebrewed coffee and your homebrewed coffee machine is making you feel just as sophisticated as walking into a Starbucks. This philosophical issue is, you know, I shouldn't have to be a barista to make gourmet coffee at home. So when Nespresso can unpack and understand their customers better, they're better positioned to actually tell the story about how their product is innovative by connecting with the people who they're trying to solve a problem for, and taking themselves out of being the hero of the story. So, you know, innovation stories really get started when we've defined what our customer needs or wants, what the solution or the innovation that we've crafted, how it helps them avoid failure or be successful. It kind of goes back to that original, like Maslow's law, like we're all literally trying to figure out how to survive and thrive. And, you know, when a new neighbor moves in and comes over and knocks on your door or offers you, you know, come over for a beer, like you might think, oh, what a nice guy, right? But actually subliminally, what's happening is your neighbor is trying to build a relationship with you. So when the barbarians come up over the cul-de-sac, you're going to join arms and fight with them. Like that's subliminally what's actually going on, but we act it out in much more, you know, modern, appropriate terms, but that's actually what's happening at like the root level. And we have to really understand that to be really effective storytellers and to communicate innovation. Because what innovation does is it solves either, you know, a harm, a risk, or something that's going to cause failure, or it improves somebody's life. So it goes really back to that Maslow's idea and, you know, the risk to barbarians, whether it's, you know, a Nespresso or a Tesla, or communicating the solution work that a DoD organization does to get solutions in the hands of warfighters faster, kind of unpacking the risk to failure, barriers to success that your customer has, and then positioning yourselves as the guide in the story is the recipe I have found to be most successful in the work I've been doing for the Department of the Defense in the last 2 years. So that's my little kickoff of some kind of framework, some examples, some stories, maybe a little bit provocative, but would love to just pause there and turn it over to you, Mark, and maybe we can jump in.
Yeah, perfect. No, that was great. Yeah, I could talk about Nespresso for hours. What a machine. Does anybody have a question? You can either shout it out or raise your hand. I'm interested, just to kind of kick it off, Suzanne, about how wrestling with, like, working with engineers, really smart people, PhDs, and just sometimes the over-reliance on technology or specs, you know, to describe it, and wrestling with, you know, hey, what's the problem we're really trying to solve here, and what's the story we can tell, instead of overwhelming the potential customer with data and facts. Do you have a solution? Do you have a solution for that?
Yeah, getting engineers to talk about, what their solution is, because they want to go through the science. And when you get them talking to say, like, actually, what problem are you solving? And who does this problem, who benefits from the solution? And surprisingly, that sometimes seems like a really long distance in a conversation to get to with an engineer, because they get wrapped around making something faster. Well, making something faster for fast sake is all great, but does it actually solve a problem? Does it meet a need? And that's really where, when you go back to the idea of a definition for innovation, does it add value? Fast for fast sake that actually doesn't solve a problem is not really innovative. And so you've got to connect a customer, you got to connect a real life person or organization who benefits. And so that's where getting that engineer talking, and it oftentimes take other people involved to really say, well, here's who would benefit. In our work, we're really trying to look at not just a military benefactor, but also a commercial benefactor. GPS started off as a military solution. But, I think we can all agree it has quite the commercial application just to literally get around. And so you got to sometimes bring new people to the table outside of that area of expertise to say, well, what about, if a lawyer is able to apply a solution that's been developed in another category to their work because they understand it, that's actually innovative. And that's where just bringing people of diverse backgrounds and experiences to the conversation to say, well, what if we use this in this application, what would happen? So it requires just a lot of collaboration and kind of talking through, but you got to put a face to it. It can't be fast for fast sake.
Hey, Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, Suzanne, one of the things that you just mentioned was the barriers to innovation. And, there's a lot of research out there that one of the biggest issues when it comes to corporate innovation is, that there are these internal turf wars or political battles internally, so that you may have an internal innovation team that might be working on internal innovation to improve processes in terms of whether it's, P&L or whatever the case may be. So it creates a different type of need for storytelling to kind of have that those stories really more closely aligned with the organization's philosophy. And I don't know if you have any examples or ideas in terms of things that you might have come across with people that are trying to work on some of these internal political wars.
Yeah, I've lived through some of those. One way that I've handled it myself is we actually did a mandatory storytelling training for the entire organization, regardless of your role. And the key message there was that everybody's job is storytelling. It's not the marketing team. Every person who is talking to another person inside the organization, from colleague to colleague to someone outside the organization, is involved in storytelling. They're involved in the conveying of information and knowledge. And so I did 3 storytelling workshops, a succession of 3, part 1, part 2, part 3, with 80 people earlier this spring. It was mandatory. And I took them through the story framework that I shared with you, which is largely based on this book, which I really love. It's this really thin book. And if you guys don't know Donald Miller, it's super awesome. It's so approachable. I read it, reread it in Jamaica at the beach over Thanksgiving. And, it has these, that's actually where the Nespresso example came from. It's super great. And for everybody to get on the same page, right? Because most people have that default space that they want to thump their chest about what your organization did or what their team did. And by literally just simple little kind of, it can even be a 30-minute training going through, hey guys, we're not the hero here. Like, let's go back to the Star Wars example. Everybody knows it. We need to be, Obi-Wan Kenobi, or we need to be Yoda. Like, what we're providing is the plan piece here. We are not the hero, and it kind of takes all of the armor off, and it helps everybody kind of get refocused of why we do innovation, right? We do innovation to improve lives and to change the world. And when you can take away the armor about the turf wars and get people focused on the hero, which is not us, but somebody we're trying to help, I think that is what I have found as a kind of a gelling factor. And it doesn't have to be this elaborate 3-part training like I did. That's what my customer wanted to do. And I'm a contractor, so I did it. We probably could have made really good progress with one. I think, we've become a much more powerful organization because it's become part of our DNA now. While I'm sharing books, here's another one that's great. It goes back to a little bit about what Mark said, weekend language. So weekend language is around the idea that we are all natural storytellers on the weekend. We're sitting out at the fire pit having, a glass of wine with friends, and we're telling stories about what happened this weekend and connecting with people's brains around stories. And then Monday comes around and we're talking about circling back and synchronizer solution and all this garbage language. If we actually think about our jobs around weekend language and who we are on the weekends, will be much better Monday through Friday. And that's a related concept, right? Because to be effective in getting the stories across, people have to connect and understand with the concepts, and we have to kind of unpack what the impact is. And it has to be in language that they understand, that actually connects with that hero, right? And other people who might be experiencing the same challenges that the hero has experienced, right? We're trying to create a persona that we can replicate, to take our innovation stories out to others who need to know so that they'll buy our product or engage our services.
Hey, Brian, go ahead.
Hey, thank you. I think this is very timely for me personally, Suzanne and Mark and everybody, although I wish maybe I'd listened to it, heard you a week ago, because I think I know what you're saying. I know the importance of telling stories, and I work in public policy and economic policy, so I like to think I do a good job of telling stories as opposed to let me tell you how smart I am. I'm the smartest person here, so do what I say. But you just reminded me that the little paper I just wrote and submitted for editing, it's all, let me tell you how smart I am and why you should do what I say. It makes me wish I had time to go back and tell some of those stories. And in the area of international trade, there are plenty of those stories out there. Mm-hmm. And one of my friends who works on trade policy too said the most media requests he's ever gotten in his career was during the infant formula shortage, because everybody gets a story and everybody is interested, as opposed to here's why the tariff rates are as a result of trade with China and all this boring stuff. Yeah. So I'm not sure I really have a specific question other than to say this is very relevant to me, and I need to put some kind of poster on my wall or something to remind myself not to fall back into that trap of just hammering people with numbers and stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, and I will. What I'm happy to do is I'm going to put in the chat. There's a free website that might help you, and you can print some things out, and they actually have really great templates. And here it is right here. And it's based on the story brand work, Donald Miller. You need to give them your email address, but then it gives access to the site, and you can actually print out a little template that helps you fill in, okay, I'm talking about this economic policy. All right, what are the problems I'm trying to solve? Who's the villain? What's the external problem, internal or philosophical issue? And, who's sort of the guide, someone within my organization that's helping get them through that, or it could be a product, right? And then what are the risks of failure? Like, what is the impact of failure, and what are the highs of success? so that you can really identify what are the elements of the story that you need to communicate, and then put the character, the hero, at the front of that. And, talk about, through the lens of the person's shoes that is walking in those problems, and then how what you did as the guide, or the idea that you came up with, the plan, helped them avoid, failure, and made them successful. And it's not contrary, like having your organization's name or your name in the headline doesn't necessarily make you a more powerful or more memorable part of that story. The story is remembered by like what happened, not necessarily who did it. Like that comes, but this idea that you got to thump your chest and have your name in all caps in the biggest font possible, that's not what's memorable about the story. What's memorable is like the challenge and how someone overcame that challenge. And then that makes them turn the page and say, well, how did they do that? Who do I call? Like that's actually the sticky part that we all want to happen. That gets to be the powerful thing that makes your story become a word of mouth, kind of clickable opportunity, right? So the mystorybrand.com has a great script there. I'll also just shamelessly put into the chat a link to a year in review report. This was really the first major publication the organization I support put out. And it's a series of about, 4 dozen short stories, like 200 to 300 words, lots of graphics and lots of pictures, right? So stories aren't always words. In fact, the first story that we all create when we're born and we cry, that is our story number one. And we're communicating, we're hungry, like we're thirsty, this hurts, or using our voice, right? That's actually our first story. We're communicating a need. And what happens when we shout out and cry? Someone wraps us up in a blanket, they stick a bottle in our mouth. They're actually providing the solution to the philosophical, the external problem that we're experiencing, like pain, hunger. And then there's this intervention. So our cry is that first story that we're all telling. And if you think about that it's not always fancy words. It could be literally an expression, could be an image, but the power of imagery to accompany our stories, or in infographics is really key. I use that, I think, fairly effectively in our first ever year in review report. We won Best Government Annual Report. All kidding aside, the bar's pretty damn low. It kind of come into the government space with commercial background that I have. It was not so hard to hit that out of the park, but bringing complicated technical things to the table and being able to meet people wherever they are, different levels of experience.
Hey, Suzanne, once you set on a story, this is gonna be like a multi-part question, but can you sort out like the challenges and opportunities, where some stories maybe you want them to be a slow burn, maybe it's a word of mouth, or some stories you're fully committed and you're like, hey, we're going to spend 10-15 million dollars, we have a website, we're going to do billboards. How do you sort out, is this the right story? Do you have any insights on that before you kind of go to market with your stories?
Yeah, I mean, I start with putting one out there and see what the reaction is. So in my space, I mean, I have 3 audiences. I have, Department of Defense, military organizations, academia, and early stage ventures. And, 2 out of 3 of those are non-military. And our objective is to engage people who've never done business with the Department of Defense to come in and help solve problems, create companies, to put solutions in the hands of warfighters faster. And, to do that, I have to think about things differently, because I have 3 pretty different audiences that aren't used to working together. So, I'll float a story out there that, maybe just a short 200 words and kind of see what the impact is. How much are people talking about it? And based on that formula, are they reacting to kind of underdog stories of, here's a company that had tried to get 4 contracts with the DoD and was unsuccessful, but because of the unique combination of resources that were made available via the plan that we present, we called them to action to join our little hackathon program, that they were able to overcome the barriers of the past. And it's led to, 3 rounds of funding, and now they've got a $10 million prototype contract. Like, I get a little story out there and I see, okay, how many people are clicking or sharing it? What's the reaction in the field that my team can share? Folks love those, hero slays dragon, is successful, right? They overcome something hard. And that's a pretty easy, repeatable story for me, because that's actually part of our business model. But seeding them out there and see what happens. And, it might be different techniques of what you lead with. And just like anything, it's like advertising. Do 3 or 4 different ads, see which colors resonate. These stories that you're crafting and getting out there are not thousands of words. They're maybe 200 words, right? They're just short pieces of content. I don't have this book yet, but it's going to be here any day yet. But anybody that follows Axios, the founders of Axios have a new book out that unpacks how they put their newsletters together. And it's called Smart Brevity. And I'm a huge Smart Brevity kind of scholar in training. Mark's laughing, but if you go and look at Smart Brevity and the work that they're doing at Axios, it's also around the idea that people are scanning your shit. Like, nobody reads anymore. You get like 14 seconds. I do a weekly newsletter and it's usually 3 minutes, not to read all the clicked out content, literally just to read the scanned stuff. That's still too long, but that's down from like 12 minutes, right? So I'm making progress, and I think that's all we can ever do, is to just make progress and, test and try again. It's really, I think, more ready, fire, aim. Your ready is like, okay, this is what I think I know. I've done a lot of research. I'm an expert in this field. I just need to get it out there and see what happens. And then you come back and you aim, and you repeat that process, because you can't get stuck in ready, ready, ready. Then nothing's ever out there. Very rarely does anything anymore follow ready, aim, fire. Like, I don't work in that perfect world. Maybe one of you guys do. Like, I just don't think it exists anymore. I think many of us know colleagues, or maybe we have some tendency of fire, fire, fire. But you gotta kind of be willing to get it out there, ready, fire, and then come back and aim with your next attempt, or to revise it. And look, none of us are spring chickens here. Like, we all have confidence and experience to really inform that ready stage, that we should be ready to pull the trigger and get it out there, and have enough confidence to own it and come back and say, okay, well, it was all right, but I think we can do better next time. And here's what we're going to tweak. Go out there and learn from it.
That's perfect. Does anybody else have a question? This is a very quiet group. I know there's some smart people here who are not asking questions. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go again. Suzanne, one of the other things that's really interesting, particularly with you working for the Department of Defense, and you brought up one of the other segments that you work quite a bit with, are these early stage startups. Oftentimes large organizations, particularly something like the federal government, and particularly in regulated industries, whether it's finance and so on and so forth, their ability to work with startups can be severely hampered in terms of through legal issues, in terms of things that we consider that could potentially kill a startup when it comes to a 500-page legal document that they need to review. Obviously, they don't have legal expertise in order to manage through something like that. Do you have any experiences, especially with, the work that you've done with, your partners, how they've kind of overcome some of those barriers to make it, an easier access and entry for startups to, work with organizations like the DoD?
Yeah, so the gulf between sort of idea and contract, or somebody who has a solution and getting it into the hands of a warfighter, in our case, is called the valley of death, right? That's probably a term of art applied to other situations, but it can be really long in the DoD contracting lifecycle. And so under Ash Carter, several different innovation organizations were stood up, including ours, to help eliminate or at least reduce the valley of death. And so, one thing for our organization is working with us doesn't cost you anything. We don't take a percentage of your company or anything like that. Our job is literally to source problems, get them into hands of people who want to solve problems and create businesses, so that we can expand the national security innovation base of companies. So it's not just the big top 5. When $1 billion piece of equipment that took 20 years of R&D rolls off the line, it's already inadequate based on current technology. And so we need all of that kind of aftermarket plug and play solutions that can be added in. I did a video last year up for the Super Bowl. So talk about storytelling. So I've never had the pleasure of working with a client who had a budget to do a Super Bowl ad, but I took no time. I spent no time wasting to tell the story that the National Security Innovation Network ran its first Super Bowl ad. And I developed an ad. It cost me $3,000 to produce it. And I ran it during the Super Bowl. And you better believe it, I issued a press release. We had a Super Bowl ad. Now, ... It ran on Armed Forces Network, which anybody knows that's only at military installations or on a submarine. But I still had a Super Bowl ad. And I took advantage of that story because it fit the narrative that we're doing something different. And that we would think about reaching people differently. And my target audience are those service members on the military bases that we all see at the beginning of the Super Bowl, huddled around in the mess hall, watching the big game. And my ad was served up to them that said, essentially in a nutshell, have you ever thought to yourself, there's a better way to do this? If you have, then come to this website and tell us what your better idea is. Because truth is, if you had a better idea, somebody else probably did. And it's probably not just relevant to the Navy, it's probably relevant to the Marines too. And we can go take your observation, get it in the hand of a early stage venture, maybe partnered with an academic, maybe even pulling a piece of current government IP off the shelf, and collide those people together, introduce them and say, you're going to work on this hackathon, like a Shark Tank style competition over 2 weeks. And at the end, you're going to pitch it to a customer and they're going to give you $50,000 for the best idea that you can continue to prototype. So we make it easy by not taking a part of their company, there's no rules really. Now, if they get a contract, right, it starts to get increasingly more difficult, but they've got a little bit of money in their hands, at least by that point. And so we're trying to ease that in, and we'll support them with some of the transition. And, there's many different government programs that help with those grants. It is by far not perfect, but we're trying to, ease that pathway. And we do it by being really clear. It doesn't cost anything and we don't take anything.
I love that. I was wondering where the Super Bowl ad was going. That was good. Before we wrap up, can you share? I mean, there's so many tactics and tools, so much technology. It's, every day there's new stuff happening. But can you, from your playbook of secrets, do you have a favorite old school tactic that you find that's still resonating that probably should be revisited and we all should be using more often?
So old school email still works. Even though people are spending 17 seconds scanning, it still works. It's in there. It's your filing cabinet. It's your brain. You go in there, you search your email to find something. So email still is super relevant. And I would say part 2 is anytime you can get a opt-in to receive text messages, there's nothing, you guys know this, standing between you and your phone when a text comes in. Texts have like a 98% read-through rate. So that's the one thing I'm adding this next fiscal year. Our organization is hopefully moving into Salesforce, and we're going to start collecting cell phone numbers so that when you opt into one of our programs, we can send you text messages during the program and then after the program that are highly relevant. We're going to have to figure out that sweet spot, but I would say email still rules. But anything you can do to lean into getting opt-in text messaging, and then to see what the threshold is for communicating with that audience via text.
I love it. All right. Hey, Suzanne, can I share your email address with the group here?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, great. And then if people want to find you, where should we find you on the internet?
LinkedIn. Probably most active on LinkedIn. Happy to connect or with anybody or chat, later. I love this topic. I'm a brand evangelist to talk about how the DoD is trying to solve problems differently. That's not just my job, but I actually really believe that it's an important mission. And happy to talk about that as well with anybody that's interested.
That's great. You're a champ for doing this. Thank you so much.
Oh,
and thanks everybody for joining. Have a good afternoon. And I don't know, maybe early October, we'll see you out in Reston at the brew house.
Come out to Reston, Virginia anytime. Let me know. Happy to host you here.
Perfect. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.